Today, it is nothing short of an act of rebellion for us to imagine divine power working in and through us and filling the natural world around us. To embrace our own soulfulness and to look out at the world with the awe and wonder it deserves from us. In this video, we examine the oft imitated but never equaled science fiction trifecta, the great trilogy that started it all: A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I'm Andrew Petiprin, Fellow of Popular Culture at the Word on Fire Institute. In modern times, human beings have developed a much different view of the natural world than our ancient ancestors had. In previous eras, humans understood themselves as stewards of creation and participants in a truly soulful world. There was no mere matter. Nature was not ours to control and manipulate, but cooperate with. For Christians in the pre-modern period, our power within the natural order was to be exercised non-competitively with God, who made everything. Everything that is exists because it was created, and it therefore has a purpose beyond any one particular function. And everything God has made shows forth His divine life and communicates His glory. In the Bible, Psalm 19 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth His handiwork." And by heavens, the Bible means what we now call space, the planets and stars and deep black expanse above us at night. But things are different now. After many centuries of creeping scientism, we have been left with a brutal power struggle at the heart of civilization. In our attempt to tame nature to our mostly selfish ends, we find nature increasingly turning on us. We have no choice but to trust technocrats, big business moguls and politicians who are constantly inventing new levers to pull on a monstrous machine. In the 3 original Star Wars movies, the brainchildren of George Lucas, the Force is the term used to describe divine power. To wield it correctly requires mastery in the form of participation in the natural order. This is the light side. Wielded incorrectly, it becomes a weapon of domination over others and a competition with its source. This is the dark side, to imagine oneself a god. And while the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas, may have been thinking more about dualistic Eastern mysticism or Aboriginal animism, there is much to say in reference to the traditional Christian view too. Lucas's 3 original Star Wars movies depict the struggle and victory of the rebellion, led by Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. In their own way, they are all soulful creatures, in touch with a divine will, whose power working through them can do more than they can ask or imagine. As we navigate the world today, the example of Luke Skywalker in the rebellion may inspire a renewed appreciation for the power of things unseen, in contrast with an impersonal scientism. In the triumph of inspired creatures over the brutality of cold technology, we could catch a glimpse of genuine good news. We may even find courage to reject the machine entirely. A New Hope sets the tone for all subsequent Star Wars movies right from the beginning, with John Williams' famous score, the iconic scrolling titles, and a dramatic camera pan down from a massive ship and into the realm of creatures. We would identify many of these creatures as human, and a great more we would identify as humane, rational, embodied beings with free will. Even the rebellion's droids are depicted as more than machines, with distinct personalities that often lend comedic effect. The Imperial stormtroopers, on the other hand, seem to be mindless automatons that typify soulless, violent technocracy. Just a few minutes into the first film, we meet Darth Vader, whose identity and activity are central to everything that happens in Lucas's story. At its core, Star Wars is the saga of Darth Vader, formerly known as Anakin Skywalker, who represents the struggle of nature and technology within his very body and soul. Vader's old master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, describes him as being more machine now than man. And yet, Vader's power comes from a particular sensitivity to the Force. He looks like a robotic monster, but his breathing apparatus, his lightsaber, the Star Destroyer he travels on, and the Death Star base the Empire he serves seeks to dominate the galaxy with, are all ultimately props. As we see throughout the trilogy, part of the tragedy of Darth Vader is that his soulfulness has been co-opted by the state, the Empire, by the machine that knows how to produce only slaves. Those who rebel against the system, who rage against the machine, must be brought in line by coercion, torture, or death. Luke Skywalker has a soulful sensitivity that eventually gives him great power too. And as he comes of age, he develops an interior longing that his guardians, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, worry about because they know its origin. The Skywalker family is both blessed and cursed with the Force, which Luke learns all about for the first time when he meets Old Ben, Obi-Wan Kenobi, once a Jedi Master, played by the great Alec Guinness. Through Obi-Wan's teaching, Luke learns that the material world and the soul-crushing machine of the Empire is not all there is. In fact, it's not the true power in the universe at all. Obi-Wan tells Luke about the Force, calling it an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. A Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. We learn that the Force can even be controlled and commanded, but only by participation, not competition. Luke becomes a disciple of Obi-Wan and a proponent of the idea of the Force almost in an instant. Just days later, he is incredulous at Han Solo's lack of faith, saying, "You don't believe in the Force, do you?" Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, represents the realist mindset, someone deeply embedded in the technocratic paradigm, but clearly not entirely of it. In one of his most memorable lines, Han says, "Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a blaster at your side, kid." But then he adds, "I've never seen anything to make me believe there is one all-powerful force controlling everything." It's hard to see deeper reality when one's whole society is organized around the exact opposite way of thinking. But eventually Han comes to believe. Like the Apostle Thomas in the Gospel according to St. John, Han is given the opportunity to come to believe through his own experiences, whereas others must rely on what they have heard from others. In the much later sequel film, The Force Awakens, Han finally confesses, "It's true. All of it." And on a related note, in the standalone Star Wars movie Rogue One, we meet characters who seem to belong to a religion of the Force without seeing anything like what Han's experiences have led him to believe. Eventually, Obi-Wan Kenobi displays the full extent of the power of the Force when he lets Darth Vader kill him. He declares, "You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." Death is not the end, because a person is more than mere matter. As Jesus says in St. Matthew's Gospel, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." In A New Hope's final sequence, the unlikely assault on the Death Star, Luke is successful because he trusts first in his own humane formation on his homeworld of Tatooine, where he learned to target womp rats and fly down into Beggar's Canyon. He also trusts in a power outside himself, rather than the technical gadgets of the world. When he is finally in position to launch the missile that will set off a chain reaction, destroying the Empire's great starbase, He scandalizes his commanders by switching off his targeting computer. "Use the Force," he hears Obi-Wan telling him. Bullseye. When the Death Star blows up, it is a triumph of the soul over technology, the person over the machine. Fittingly, the final scene of the film is an award ceremony in a temple of stone and green growing things. In Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, we enter a dark night of the soul and the fierce return of the technocratic paradigm. The Empire Strikes Back begins on the cold, remote world of Hoth, where Luke and Han get lost, and Luke is mauled by a snow creature called a Wampa, who in many ways represents the natural order. If you end up in an animal's habitat, you may find yourself in danger. Then, the Empire arrives, as advertised. The scientific weaponry of the Empire turns out to be much bigger than the one big moon-like base. They bring their heaviest artillery, mechanized vehicles shaped like robotic mammoths, to destroy the rebels in hiding. Only through ingenuity, scrappiness, and something like supernatural grace do most of the rebels manage to escape to fight again another day. Luke knows it is time to continue his training on Dagobah, the home of the Jedi Master Yoda, while his friends pursue other missions. Yoda remains one of the most iconic characters in the Star Wars franchise, and in all of film history. Voiced and controlled by the famous puppeteer Frank Oz, Yoda has become the epitome of pop spiritual wisdom in modern culture. He speaks in strange syntax characteristic of Latin or Greek translated verbatim into English. He is playful but intense. He experiences a great lightness of being, despite being more aware than anyone else of the danger of the dark side. He has no obvious physical strength and lives on a primitive world devoid of all modern technology. But he is a soulful powerhouse. He perfectly embodies cooperation and participation with nature rather than competition and domination. With Yoda, Luke learns that using the Force is not just about technique, nor is it just about choosing the good version over the bad version. Luke must ultimately face his worst fear, becoming like Darth Vader, selling out to, or even becoming, the machine. Luke's training stalls out. He cannot control his emotions or use the Force properly. He is angry and afraid. Yoda chastises him. Try not. Do. Do or do not. There is no try. Luke determines to end his training and rescue his friends, whose plight he has sensed from across the galaxy. Both Yoda and the ghost of Obi-Wan object, fearing that Luke's passion will lead to vulnerability to the dark side. But Luke is right this time. He is motivated deep in his humanity, in his heart and soul, and this quality helps him become the man he is destined to be, the rebel. The Empire Strikes Back culminates in Han, Leia, and Chewbacca being betrayed by Han's friend, Lando Calrissian. The Empire has made him an offer he cannot refuse. In our own technocratic paradigm, it often works this way too. Buying off ideals that conflict with the official program is child's play to the rulers of the system we inhabit. Han is frozen in carbonite and shipped inanimate back to Jabba the Hutt. Again, scientism neutralizes its adherents' enemies, like the gas chambers at Auschwitz or the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Luke and Vader confront each other, fighting for the first time, resulting in Luke's loss of his hand and almost his sanity. Vader wounds Luke's body and his soul. Luke is now in crisis about his identity, his purpose, and he receives a robotic replacement hand, symbolizing how the machine threatens to take him over, as it has his father. In the final scene, the main characters stare off into an uncertain future. They may have passed through the worst of the dark night of the soul, but they do not know what comes next. The machine awaits their next move. Return of the Jedi begins with a return to Tatooine, Luke's home world, where the landscape is barren like the ice world of Hoth, but blinding sunlight has replaced the cold and gloom. Immediately, the light's inevitable victory over the darkness is proclaimed. Luke comes to retrieve his friends from Jabba the Hutt, using the full power of the light side of the Force. He has come to terms with the predominance of goodness within him, despite the brokenness of his past. Han and Leia end up on the forest moon of Endor, a lush environment populated by the Ewok people, who represent souls uncorrupted by the machine. But even the Ewoks are susceptible to corruption, as they hilariously try to worship the strange, shiny robot C-3PO as their new god. With the Ewoks' help, the rebels destroy the Imperial technology on Endor that protects the new Death Star. The return of the right ordering of nature is coming. The machine is now on the ropes. Luke and Vader face each other in combat once again, with the Emperor Palpatine, the master of the dark side, fueling the flames of hatred. Like the devil, the Emperor is the tempter, offering Luke the false promise of great worldly power if he will betray goodness, deny his true nature, and dominate. The lure of power and wealth for just going along with the technocratic paradigm is great for us, too. Luke finally comes to his senses after a fit of rage, casting away his lightsaber and facing near death from the Emperor's lightning blasts. Seeing his son, his flesh and blood, suffer, Darth Vader's humanity wakes up. His soul takes over, casting the Emperor down to his demise. Vader then wants to shed the machine for good, to see Luke with his own eyes, thus truly saving his soul, even though he cannot breathe. He dies, at long last, in peace with God, the Force. The second Death Star blows up, and as in A New Hope, the rebels celebrate victory over the technocracy in the wholesome, flourishing setting of the natural world, with drums and singing and bonfires. The Force ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and now Anakin Skywalker, the late Darth Vader, smile at Luke. Victory. As St. Paul says to the Corinthians, death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Subsequent Star Wars prequels, sequels, one-off films, animated and live-action television shows, novels, comic books, and video games have gone in wildly different directions with the question of the Force, the soul, technology, and good and evil. In Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, George Lucas wrecks the dichotomy of the good natural soul versus the evil artificial machine by redefining what the Force is. Suddenly, it is a sort of biological agent detectable in the bloodstream. Sadly, it's as if the Force becomes part of the technocratic paradigm, just as God has become part of scientism, the God of the gaps that science can't fill, and not much more. But the original films, true to the great mythological tradition, tell the story of a human journey towards right ordering of his own soul and the world. Star Wars is about life, past, present, and to come, and about the man-made power that will not, in the end, beat any of us down for good.